I guess the first question I have before we jump in here is, how close is Weird West to the original musings or ideas you had when you first went independent and tried to make another immersive sim on like a smaller scale, as it were?
Uh, it's very different. I think, other than the values, immersive sims is a set of values, and uh, different immersive sims torchbearers might have different definitions of those values, but uh, it's a blurry science, right? But I think, other than the values, which have always been the values that I've had as well back in the days for any of my games, the vision for the game itself ended up being very, very different.
Thematically, was it similar to what you are? You strike. I'm a European who lives in America, and you're a European who lives in Texas. So I totally vibe with the desire to explore this area of American culture. Was
I like that you made a difference between Texas and America.
yeah.
uh, yeah, no, like, as far as like the world definition and the vibe, I think that remain pretty intact, even though it's pictures that get defined over time, right? But I think when we started, we wanted to land somewhere where we did land.
Right. So let's, I guess, talk about it from a purely like sort of what we're looking at here. Um, Obviously, immersive sims and games, immersive sims you've worked on in the past are predominantly, if not all, from a first-person perspective, and this game is obviously not. Can you tell us, I guess, what you gain from that and what you lose from that?
Yeah. So, that was part of the original vision, by the way, for Weird West, which is to spend less time on the graphics as far as like the technology goes, and meaning we then therefore have more, we can spend more effort on what's more important to us, which is the lore and the art direction and what we're trying to communicate about this world, rather than being crippled by the number of shaders and passes and number of vertices that we have in each object, and
Right.
and the realism of them, because we've joked about that statistic a million times now, but I think in a AAA game, it's easy to say that it takes maybe it can take like a week for a simple object, a week for person. If you look at the full turnover, right? Like, there's the concept art of this object and anything. In the past, I've given the example of a chair, but let's say an abstraction, like sort of an object, like a simple object in the world. Like, there's the design phase, and then there's the phase where it get approved by some producer, and then it gets sent to the modeler, and then it gets sent to the texture artist, and etc., etc. It can take 1 week,
Right.
and so that limits you somewhat, somehow. Not only for the money that you spend, which becomes really huge, but also if you want to improvise and add like another set of items, then everybody start to think it's impossible, and it forces you to work in a way that is way more planned, way more. Everything has to be on schedule, etc., etc. Whereas in our case, a simple object probably takes an hour or two
Right.
uh, of the same person without going through all of these hoops. So that was part of it. How do we get more agile? How do we get more time for what matters? Meaning the interaction, the fun, the storytelling, and also we save money. Therefore, we don't
Hmm.
have to necessarily try to sell to 10 million people. But if we manage to sell to a million people, then everybody's happy. The million people that are playing the game, and we as developers, and also as a business.
What do you lose then, I guess? Because obviously, immersive sims are all about immersion, and first person, you get a lot of that immersion not for free, but it comes maybe a little bit easier. Is there elements that are trickier when you pull out this far?
I think it's an abstraction. When we talk about immersion, Immersion is it would be a sum of different layers that lead to immersion, and the first person camera definitely is part of that. But then I think in the same way a book could be very immersive because of how your brain bridges the gap between the words and the story that is being told to you. I believe that this is the same here. Like your mind calibrates. The very first time you load the game, you might or might not like the art direction, but assuming you like it, uh, if there are some hurdles because of the technology where like you don't see the facial expressions or uh, the objects, the definition of the objects is lower, etc. It won't take much before your brain adapts to that and then puts it behind and get into the story the same way you would with a AAA game.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
my theory.
Yeah. I suspect writing as well helps a lot in bridging that gap. Let's talk about, I guess, one of the fundamental physical aspects of that filling it in. Then, we're obviously here in Crackle near the start of the game. I've loaded a pretty early. I think this is maybe an hour in or so. And then obviously the rest of the game is on this map, which again at the start of the game is very uncovered, and then by the end, hopefully, you've sort of removed a lot of the fog of war, but you're still finding things. Can you tell us a little bit about like how do you decide? Was this always the case, or how do you decide where to put the detail in? Because obviously this isn't an open world game in the way that you can walk for hours and hours through the desert, however fun that might be. But you did have to pick your battles with the types of places and how much detail is in those places. So how did you
Yeah,
do that, I guess?
we went with the Fallout One approach, I assume, which was it is a kind of an open world where the in between important location is abstracted, and then you can still have an encounter that is generated either randomly or either because there's a story moment which we want to interrupt you and create that surprise there. And that's really how we went with that because the alternative would have to make I guess like a more modern open world approach where every meter that you traverse is actually real, and therefore there's also sometimes a lot of nothing happening
Right.
for a few minutes, which it could also be a good thing. It's just that it's not the choice we made. But it reminds me of your initial question about the difference between the when we started and where we landed. The big fundamental difference back then was that all that you just showed was randomly generated entirely in the very
Right.
first iteration of the game, and also the I think the overall approach was it was going to be a roguelike where you would have one run and eventually try to live through as many adventures as you can before you lose your character, and then start again with a different character with a different start somewhere else, different background,
Right.
etc., etc. And it would be relying entirely on side quests. It would be the game. I always thought, man, I wish I could play a Fallout game without any main quest.
Yeah.
Just play side quests forever because those side quests are so fun. So that was the theory, and then we found out that the way to make that happen, going through procedural approach, was limited and limiting, and we ended up thinking we doing a U-turn and say like we're gonna author one of those big stories as we know how to do, and then on top of that sprinkle the experience with the procedural that we've learned through the first part of the development.
Right.
And that's how we ended up in this game that is partially authored and partially procedural.
So yeah, I'll get into some of that stuff on the map in a little second. I want to ask you first though about, I guess, the design of Crackle, because this is again the first of many of these towns that you're going to come across. It's the first place the character meets characters which may or may not, I guess, be with you for quite a long part of this journey. what was the, I guess, what are the fundamental sort of like main goals of Crackle? Like, is it a place? Is it a place to be safe? Is it a place to get quests? Is it, what were your sort of main, I guess, ideas for Crackle, and did it change much as well over development?
So in the when we start a game, and specifically a game that can be a little overwhelming, like an RPG like this, we didn't want to start directly in the middle of Grackle because it could be seen as, oh wow, there's too much to explore before I really just want to get into the meat of the game. So that's why we started not in Grackle, but like in a farm and with a smaller cinematic, something that explains what your primary goal are. But for us, Grackle, uh, since it's about 20 minutes into the game that you see Grackle for the first time, it's a good opportunity to tell more about the game, about the world in which the game happens, and make that intro to a fairly grim world actually, where something has happened. People have been killed, abducted. We don't exactly know why, and it's part of like the same reason why. Without spoiling too much the game at the beginning, but like why the same type of problems happen to your family, uh, and also it tells a message. It tells we are simulating the world. There are people on schedules. There are stores. It's a like life kind of thing where you can pretty much you will it's a hub. You will find some quests here. It's a home that you'll be back to often. So that kind of like gives this overall communication about what the game is, at least in some aspects. That's why it was important to us to bring that Grackle thing pretty early. I don't know how much you've played
Oh, complete.
games like Ultima back in the days, if you were an Ultima fan or not, but I was a huge Ultima 7 fan, and I'm 51, so that was a minute ago. Uh,
You're looking great for 51.
Thank you. But anyway, to me, Grackle is very similar to some of the cities in Ultima 7 in what they would offer. To see that little theater of life, those people that have their houses and their store and something to tell you.
Speaking of side quests, I guess I've taken all of the wanted posters here right at the start. Can you give me a little idea of I guess, aside from there being fun quests, just going and assassinating these people or capturing them, something I've never done or really actually even tried to do. What was the utility of these? I'm assuming it was about trying, because there were parts in this game where maybe money could be one way around a problem. Was that a big part of it, having these quests like this, or is it a way of getting people to go out into the world, or what is the reason behind these types of side quests?
The bounty specifically?
Yeah, the bounties.
Yeah, I think it's. I'm sure that's a matter that is common to every game design. Yeah, unless it's a very very focused game like a racing game or something. But if you're talking about like an adventure action RPG kind of games, I'm sure most designers will agree that it's important to vary the type of experience, alternate between different paces and different motives that the player can have. There's self motives like, oh, I need a new horse, versus, oh, I need to solve the main problem of this place, versus, oh, maybe I'm going to be interested in the personal lives of some of the citizens there that don't have to be related to the bigger picture. And I think that's what we're trying to give here, is like we're trying to give different layers to our story, to our world, so that the player can feel like they discover it at their own pace and in the way they want. And as you said, in some ways, money is always helpful in our game, and therefore doing those side content not only informs the player about more about the world and the lore. We love to teach the player about our world through the quests that they have. Like for example, if there's a way to know a little better about the sirens and what they do and where they come from, then we're going to make sure that happens in one of the side quests.
Right. Tell us. Let's talk about combat, and I guess everything about it, like traversal and movement and the whole thing. How would you describe the combat in Weird West? Because obviously it is sort of doing its own thing, maybe is fair to say, in terms of the way in which the player controls or targets and stuff like that. It's like you said at the start when you're talking about maybe the art style takes a while to settle in. For me, this was the one element of the game. It took a little while to settle in, and then after a couple of hours, it was second nature to me. So how did you arrive at this combat? And I guess is it a balancing act of trying to keep it involving but not too involving, not make it the focus, but make it a fun part of the game?
Yeah, combat can. First of all, we had to make a decision: was it going to be real time, or was it going to be turn based? And in our case, this decision was fairly fast because coming from the immersive sim world, you would think of these things as physical and taking advantage of a real time simulation, sandboxy aspect of your game. So
Right.
we said it's gotta be real time, and then we didn't want one thing that is very important in immersive sims, and frankly in any game that I will ever work on, is player agency. And so if you have a gun and if you can shoot at things, I wanted to be able to shoot at anything, and that was a big problem that I didn't anticipate. And also, as you're doing right now, you're climbing on things, so that was another thing. It's like I want to be able to jump, climb, attack things from above. I need verticality, and not just me, but all our designers and all the level designers we have at Wolfi. Most part they come from Arcane, so
Right.
they had the same reflex, the same kind of like go-to ideas. And so then we ended up being in a situation where we're pretty much having a combat that is very complex to do in real time with that angle, allowing players to do whatever they want because of that sandbox experience is super core to the kind of games that we like to make.
Can you overwhelm players though in that respect? Like, you can do a lot with the combat in this in terms of like, there are barrels with TNT written on them very obviously, and there's like green goo barrels which are clearly full of toxicity. So you're obviously doing a lot of work to try and telegraph to players, because here's the question. I guess the game does a good job of like highlighting what's important and sort of letting the other stuff fall into the background. How do you do that? Is a lot of that an art task, or is it design, or is it everyone?
Yeah, it's iterative. I mean, frankly, the first as we started to work on the combat, it's just a big salad to which we add ingredients. Like now we can shoot, now we can throw things, now we can kick into barrels and see them roll, and maybe if they hit some fire, they will explode, etc. At the same time, the NPCs are running around trying to shoot you, maybe looking for you if they've lost you. All those things that are super important to any game that I've worked on. The awareness system, like now you can see those little question mark above their heads, etc. And frankly, the very first iterations were a big mess. Like it was impossible to understand anything to what was happening.
Right.
Where are the enemies? If they were on the other side of the wall, if they were shooting at you from outside of the camera angle, you could not even make a distinction between your followers and the enemies. So am I hidden? Am I being covered right now? Is anyone shooting at me? All of these things. That's where you work between artists, the UI designer that we have, UI artist. His name is Julien Mario, and of course programmers and frankly everybody, game designers included. And it's a very slow, super iterative process where you have something that could be fun, but right now it's just a mess. And how do you clarify? Because a lot of what makes this combat ultimately possible or not is how do you manage to declutter it, and how do you manage to somehow serve it in a way that is digestible and clear to players as things are happening. And that was, and still is to some degree, because we're patching the game, one of the hardest parts.
Yeah, I haven't played in a few weeks, and I've already noticed one quality of life upgrade here, because I went to scrap one of my guns to free up some inventory space, and aha, what's
Oh
this?
yeah, so you downloaded the patch.
Yeah, so this is you can mass scrap all of them, I guess.
Mass scrap all of them. Yeah, those are things where we never thought of it when we're starting to, before we release. That's interesting how we had a fair amount of testing on this game. At some point, we even had a closed beta
Right.
with 1,000. We had like maybe 1,500 players, and feedback. We the scrapping scrapping multiple weapons at a time, or in general the inventory management, it came a little bit, but it did not came back as loud as it did after the game shipped.
Right.
And so we did not we did not see this coming with that such loud voice. But yeah, that was one of the things. People not liking to having to manage their inventory to the level that we were asking them to do. Then we had to do this. We had to do this, scrap multiple weapon at the time, at the same time, which is easy to do had we known it before.
Right.
The thing that is it's kind of a necessary evil for us to have. The real process for us is to actually do the things the way we do them, which is at a very almost like atomic level. Like each of the actions are discrete and almost tedious, because you can take an object, place it on your inventory, move it from your inventory inside another slot of your inventory, put it back in the world, or throw it, combine things, etc. And it's almost like managing I don't know, an OS.
Right.
And
Yeah.
but the thing is that creates gameplay. It is tedious, but it creates gameplay. It creates things such as what I've read in some tweet posts, like things like, "Oh, I buried my son, dig my son up out of the grave, took his bone, and sold it to the store." That creates something, right? And so
Right.
if we instead had made everything an abstraction, like if you take a quest item, it goes into the abstract quest objects, or if we don't do anything of that. We do everything at a very kind of like a tedious level. But then the second phase of that is to add tools for shortcuts and making things in a mass way, etc. So, and that's what we're doing now, right?
Right.
It's like, okay, we start with the tedious because it does give gameplay opportunities. It does give more power to players. The counterpart of that is that sometimes it's a little heavier, because then now your inventory is full.
Yeah.
Because everything is real. We don't cheat. It's like, well, if you take more than too many bones, then yes, it's going to take all your inventory space. And people are used to a different kind of thing where bones are all going to pile to infinity, and then you can carry like 1,000,000 bones instead of just like being capped to 20 of them, and then it's take another slot or something. So that's been our approach right now, is to start with like a very like low level type of thing, and then we optimize later the interaction so that they're more palatable and digestible for people.
Right. And presumably you have to do the first part before you do the second part. So it's
And you got to do the first part before you do the second part.
it's a delicate balance then to not overburden
Right. I mean,
yourself.
another example is, if there's an item on the floor, on one hand you can say, we're going to model every item that there is on the floor, even the useless ones. You can pick them up as you go there. There's an option where pick up, and it goes into your inventory. Or the other approach is to say, well, we're just going to make the ammo pickable, and that's it. And,
Right.
and health potions, and then you don't even have to pick them up. As soon as you come close to one, it just absorbs it, and now your health goes up with the health potion, and your ammo are restored. Fine, we're the first kind, because it allows for more possibilities, and it will create gameplay, even if it's a little more cumbersome.
Right. And even if you don't know what that gameplay may be, you're sort of opening
Absolutely.
the possibility space up.
Totally. As a game designer, I don't know yet what it's going to create, but I
Right.
know it is going to create something.
Well, it's interesting you mention that, because, like, for instance, here's an example of something you don't often see in games, where everything that's there, well, almost everything is like something you can pick up. And one of the things that fascinated me a couple of hours into the game was realizing that even when I went to a shelf that the inventory was reflective, at least the ammo stuff, of what was in the world as well. Whereas most games, you know, you don't have open, you've drawers, so you don't have to worry about showing what's in them.
Yeah. If it's not everything showing, by the way, it's a bug because everything should be showing.
Oh no, you're right. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, the horseshoe's right there. You're right. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's important to us. We like, again, we, you know, it's like we don't like to cheat with the players. You know, we like that if there's a room, there's a way in. If there's a door that blocks this room, there's a key somewhere, or or the door is breakable. And then inside this room, if there are shelves and the objects you see on there, all of them can be taken, etc., etc. It brings this kind of like instantaneously. You can make decisions this way. You look at and you know what you're getting, right? It's like there's this instant readability of all the possibilities that you have, which I really really like. I think it's very important to immersion in general.
Right. What's the cost of this? I guess you know we've got, and you know I'm an Irish guy, so I went straight for the room full of potatoes. Even got some mashed potatoes here, which I'll have a little gollop of. But having just this pure many, I guess, dynamic objects within the world, does that create issues for you?
Of course, you constantly have to balance the clutter versus the visuals, and also for performance reasons, but
Oh,
also for gameplay reasons. You know, if you're somewhere where like everything is piled on top of each other, then it's a problem. And you have then to bring some clarity to the players so that they know pretty quickly what is actually important to take, what is optional. Some players are hoarders; they will take everything they can find. That's not how I play. So that too was a surprise. And sometimes, you know, we just realized like some players just take absolutely everything. If there's like anything to be taken, they will take it because they worry it might be helpful at some point. And
do
so they
players
will.
unlearn that behavior? Do you think? Do those players unlearn that behavior? Can you unlearn that behavior to them?
No, I think we have to accommodate them. I think we have to. We don't want to create anxiety though, so that's something that we worried about. You know, we don't want people to have the anxiety that they might have missed one bobby pin somewhere.
Right.
Uh, but we want to accommodate those players who like that because then they go back to the store and then start to sell their stuff, etc. But you see, even that was an interesting found is that for the players who play like that, there's not enough stores in the game because
Right.
they, you know, they're gonna sell absolutely everything they can. Like some people would kill NPCs, take their bones after having buried them, because now the bones can be sold to the stores. You know, it's like they optimize, and we're more like in the. I guess I don't know. Maybe we're more like sloppy players. We're not min maxers, you know. So then we thought of all those optimizers that find a way to really make the most of the game in terms of like how do they, you know, how do they progress their character, or how do they buy and sell stuff, etc. Like, well, yeah, our game is breakable for sure.
Right. I just put a barrel over here, and I think there was pistol slugs in it. So when it exploded, the pistol slugs landed on the ground. I was trying to see if I could get the corn to land. Oh, it did. It roasted. It roasted in the barrel.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing. Like, if you are sensitive to these kind of things, it's amazing, right?
Right.
If you don't care for that, then you would just like this game will just pass by you, and you're just like, well, whatever. You know, who cares about the corn that is inside a barrel that is on fire, and therefore the corn is cooked? And to me, it's the best thing ever.
I know, right? So let's talk about that a little bit, right? Because, like you said, if I feel like this is a game that you sort of get back a lot of what you put in, maybe, or if you're looking at that fine detail, and some of that comes in this in things like I guess the narrative or the story or just how dynamic it is. You talked about how like everything in the world there, right? All of the physical objects, you can interact with them in a multitude of ways in which you would expect. If you can point a gun at something, you can shoot it. So how did you, I guess, do that with the story? Because that's one of the things that sort of unraveled itself to me while playing Weird West was just how much control I had over who lived and died, what was happening in the story, in a way that, you know, having played games for whatever 20 something years, I had been taught that I couldn't do a lot of these things.
Yeah. And yeah, because anything that is authored is pretty rigid by definition. If it's a plot that we want to tell you, we're just going to tell you the plot, and then the only thing we can do as writers is to pre-plan a few branching so that in case you've done that, then this thing happen, right? That's pretty much the thing. But also we can do it in a way that doesn't cheat. Again, I think you could finish this entire game by pretty much killing anyone and doing things that are scary for a player. Like if you attack the sheriff now,
I was about to say, yeah, because she comes up a
then
bit.
how is she gonna do everything that she's supposed to do later, right? Because you're gonna be her enemy, and maybe she's dead even, and so you're gonna miss a lot of content, or some of the content is gonna be different from now on, and you're gonna be a little more let alone let to yourself. But it's possible, and I think that tension here is also, to me, what make this type of games.
Can I just say, this is exactly one of those situations where I'm trying to break the game, basically, in my head by killing the sheriff. I don't have enough, I guess, equipment or good equipment to kill her properly, so I'm throwing dynamite, and it just started fucking raining. So all the dynamite I threw just,
Yeah, it did not work.
yeah, petered out.
Yeah.
There's no question here. I just wanted to show you how cool your video game is that you made. I'm gonna zoom ahead to a later. I'm basically not showing anyone except for Jane Bell in the saves, but I'm gonna jump to a later save game here, I think, just so we can show a little bit more.
But yeah, there's a lot of permutation, by the way, to your question about the story, and most of it is planned by us. Like we try to plan the asshole playthrough and the good player playthrough, And by the good player, we're talking about the player who's doing what they're told. And even in doing what they're told, they still have some choices, Like if Mayor Weeks want me to get this deed from those farmers, am I going to do it, or instead, like I've heard that apparently he's hiding something in his cellar. Maybe I should go and check out the cellar instead, and then I have some other way to give him what he wants without stealing from poor farmers or whatever. But then when you visit the farmers, they're kind of assholes anyway. So like, I don't know, maybe I still should do that. So that's the kind of thing that we plan for. So it gives like different stories. But the thing that is more interesting, I think, is like those stories combined with some procedural stuff as well that can happen in the meantime.
Yeah.
Like you might get, like if you kill the farmers instead of stealing the deed, then one of the surviving farmers might come after you later, and that's kind of like a little piece of a dynamic story that comes and plug itself into an authored story. Or Mayor Weeks might come back as a zombie someday because you killed him, and this is like just pure random stuff where we know we have a bank of dead people that are known into the game, and sometimes if there are zombies and it's in the right area, then that would be a zombie.
And do you signal that to the player, like?
Not really, not enough maybe. But some players will notice. Some players will, oh my god, this is just I just killed the zombie of my dad or something, like that's what happened to in fact Dinga from Arcane tweeted that because he played during the plague event. We had a plague event, and his dad is buried into the cemetery of Grackle, and logically, the zombies would come out of the thing, and one of them, if it happens to be the one that he encountered, was his dad. So this is when the systems create story based on what you've done and based on what they do amongst the systems as well. So, and that's, and sometimes it can create amazing things, and sometimes it just falls flat because there's nothing interesting on that playthrough. So that's where the procedural part can be either amazing or disappointing. And so we're trying to control that demon, that genie, let's say,
Right,
in the ways that serve us the best and doesn't hurt us.
Let's talk a little bit about that dynamic element in the random encounters that happen on the map then. Um, I can imagine a world in which these are, you talk to players about random encounters in, beloved games, even like something like Final Fantasy VII, and they think of it as a drag, right? And this could easily be the case in this game, especially, before you have a horse, for instance, where at least then you kind of have the option to maybe run away sometimes. Can you tell us a little bit about, I guess, about that fine balancing act? What you wanted these random encounters to be, because obviously some of them are sort of intentional story beats, some of them are a bit more random. How random they are, like, or how much is going on behind the scenes to author them, and yeah, what the sort of objective of these was.
Well, I mean, since we're amongst friends here, I can tell you that there are not as many encounters and as varied as we initially wanted. Uh, uh, but we've been working on it. The intention was and still is that. So yeah, some of those encounters are of course needed for story reasons. So what happened is that we have a system where uh, there's a pool of things that might or must happen that go there based on what the player has done. Uh, does the player have enemies? We call them vendettas, or friends for life, or uh, has the player already seen that thing or not, etc., etc. Has the player have a good reputation or bad reputation, or this type of follower with them? So, for example, if you have a native person follower with you, might encounter like a fragment in a random way, but what will because it's like it will be in the pool of likely things to happen soon, kind of thing.
Right.
So like if the player travels, it's like, oh, the player has a native person follower. Make sure that at some point the player receives the protector fragment, and so like what happened, and then you get interrupted. He says, oh, finally we found this cemetery of where my people are buried, and we need to find this thing, or we need to protect it from grave robbers or whatever. So that was the spirit of all these things, and we've succeeded in some ways, and but not enough in variety, I assume, and so and making a game is always a learning experience.
Yeah, well, I guess when you talk about the wanting to have more variety, is that just one of those, at a certain stage you need to figure out what you're shipping with, or is it is
Well,
it
that's right. I
something
mean, the
else?
game took a fair amount of time to reach shipping, and there's a moment where players don't know that and don't care for that. Players they're like, well, I got $40. You send me this game. I don't care if you made it with two people or a million people or how long it took, or I want this game
Right.
to be great. Period. Uh, and of course I understand that. I'm a player myself, so I'll be equally harsh on any game I buy. Uh, um, but yeah, there's a moment where you have to. There's a moment where you have to make a compromise between how far are we versus how far we would like to be. Uh, it's a threshold, right? It's a threshold where you go like, well, it looks like people are liking it enough as is, and then hopefully it will work.
Right.
If not, that's why we're doing so much post-release stuff right now too, because the game is very easy. It's easy for us to plug in some more stuff because of that structure that you're showing right now. We can easily add more encounters of various types, not only combat encounters, but little side quests that are interesting and different in nature. Um,
Yeah,
that's
or
that's something that we can do.
and the seasonal stuff as well, like the plague event that you
Right,
had as
right.
well. Was there ever was travel? I feel like travel is such a part of the Western experience. Like you talk old like cowboy stories or gold mining stories or whatever. It's always about that travel. Did you ever flirt with having like some sort of fast travel system within the game, or did you always want the player to beat the ground and have intentionality as to where they were going and when?
Um, I'm trying to remember of the different iterations we had
Mm.
about all these things. The locations used to close behind once you've used them, and we made that crazy decision of letting the location open, which of course makes a more real world.
Right.
But anyway, it's not quite your question. But yeah, I do think like the traveling part is gonna bring that moment of surprise. It's gonna be like, well, you gotta go from A to B, but then between A and B, something might happen. So it elevates tension, curiosity, and also fun. Yeah, we like that. It's weird though because it's just really, we could have made it entirely abstracted and you just, you know choose a list of locations to which you go to or something. But it's
Right.
it's a little more. It feels a little more immersive this way, I believe.
Yeah, I like the tension as well of just of especially this moment where there's like a couple of seconds left and you're just almost arriving. So you've worked on a bunch of immersive sims. You've broken a lot of ground in your career at various in the various games you've worked on. Is there an element of Weird West that was like a monkey on your back you were trying to do, or like there was, or is there some part of this game that you're particularly proud of, or something you always wanted to do in an immersive sim but never got to, or always something you wanted to try but you never did? Is there any like piece, no matter how big or small, that you're particularly satisfied with?
Yeah, there's a fair amount of those. I think this is my first attempt, not only mine, but my team as well. Julien has the same passion as I have for Ultima and immersive sims, and this is our first attempt to doing more of an Ultima game than it is. If you look at our past and our biggest influences, one was Looking Glass with things like System Shock, Ultima Underworld, and the other one is Origin with games like Ultima,
Right.
maybe Ultima 7, because it was to us the top of the top. And again, I'm talking like a dinosaur right now. I get that. Most people that are be watching this video, they don't even know this word that is called Ultima. But
And that there was at least 7, and if not many more of them.
more, yeah, right? But to Julien and I, Ultima 7 was like what in fact, Divinity Original Sins, if you ask the devs, I think they have like a huge passion for Ultima 7 the same way we do, right? So there's something there. Like there's a it's the reference for a lot of designers these days. But anyway, and so that's our first attempt to do an RPG more than an immersive sim, in the sense of immersive sim were known as like smaller worlds, whereas this is like an immersive sim in an RPG environment.
Right.
So we're getting closer to to Ultima, or more modern games would be Fallout 4 or something. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of that because it's a bigger game. It's big scale. It's an immersive sim in a bigger scale, which is not easy to do at all.
Was it tricky then to do a lot of the combat stuff that's in this game? Because those games, I feel like it's a bit more. Well, there's a melee aspect to them, and there's sort of spell casting and stuff like that. But the freneticism of bullets and things like that, especially in a dynamic setting where things can go off and set other things off.
Totally, yeah, totally. There's no game that we can really point at and say, well, all we did was that game, right? Unfortunately, it's a bit of a hybrid of a lot of things. And so, yeah, having our kind of combat in a, so it's real time, but it's like Fallout 1 in a way, but in real time. So that like, what game is that? We don't know. And so that's Weird West. And yeah, of course, it has challenges that we did not see coming. And most of all, we talk about the combat and the fact that you can aim at anything. I brushed over that topic a little bit, but it's a huge deal. Because if you right now you're on top of something, for example, and if you pull out your gun, you can aim at pretty much anything that is targetable, and anything is targetable as long as it's got physics somehow, including NPCs, of course, and birds and a key or anything, a lantern that could blow up or something, independently of the verticality as well, and the distance and everything. So, and while you are jumping and running, etc. So that was an absolute nightmare to get right. And in fact, even today, we hear maybe one player out of 4 is struggling with the aiming system.
Right. What do you think that comes down to with its current
A
state?
couple of things, yeah, because it's a big topic. It's like, we've had like maybe three huge criticism about this game, and probably the loudest is the aiming system. Some people played it, pick it up, play no problem at all. Like what? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And some players are like, I can't even like, I don't even know how you shoot in this game, right? So I think the first factor is twin stick shooters. It's very likely that people who never play twin stick shooters, or it's very likely that people who never play twin stick shooters would say exactly the same thing about a twin stick shooter. It's like,
Right.
well, I don't get it, because they do small nudges. They don't push the thumb all the way. The second possibility is that they would get is that twin shooters explain better that you have to push your thumb all the way. We really fail at explaining to people, push your thumb all the way, right? If you do small nudges, it's never gonna work. It's gonna feel like, some of them think that the distance at which you're shooting is kind of like on that little crosshair or something.
Right. Yeah.
So there's something about the communication that we fail at giving. By the way, we are working on a different aiming system that has nothing to do with that, which we'll release at the next patch.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And it's actually pretty simple. We didn't think about it before, but it's going to be a little more like a third person kind of shooting, where the camera looks is also where you're going to be shooting.
Oh, interesting.
So the line is always going to follow the camera. So, and then hopefully that will fix the problem once for all, because it's weird though, right? It's weird that we have some players who just like super fluent with it. It's like, yeah, it's a great aiming system, and some players are like, I don't know. It's like I could be playing with my feet; it would be the same result.
Right.
Yeah, well, we learn again. But that was one of the biggest deal. Yeah.
Right. I wonder do you think the problem with the twin stick shooter aspect of it does not happen as nearly as much if somebody's playing mouse and keyboard?
Oh yeah, of course. Mouse and keyboard is not. Yeah, I don't think we had complaints, if any, with the aiming system on the mouse and keyboard. We've had some other complaints with mouse and keyboard, like weapon switching or whatever other problems, but not the aiming itself. Because yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're playing with the keyboard right now. Or
Yeah.
the pad. Keyboard, yeah. It should be pretty straightforward, because you have a mouse cursor and you just move around and it just works.
Yeah, it's why I was when I was reading some of the reviews or Steam reviews and stuff, it was interesting to be like, oh, okay, I haven't tried this. I should try this on a pad to see what that experience is like. But I've not done it yet, I should say.
And the funny thing is that a lot of people thought that we messed up on the pad because it was initially a game for PC, which is not true at all. Like we only converted the controls to keyboard and mouse so much later in the development. So we've been mostly focused on how do we get the aiming to work on a pad, because we knew that on a mouse and keyboard that would be easy.
One aspect of this I want to talk about, which we don't get to talk about all that much, is presentation. So the game has a very strong I guess presentation. I'm not sure if that's the right word for it necessarily. The art direction, the UI, even just hitting continue here is the most satisfying continue I've had in a video game in a while. The music, the voice work, a lot of this is to a very high standard. Was this always important to you, or I wonder if, like, because you've got a smaller team and because the scope of the game is going to feel a little less AAA, do you have to then put more effort into these areas to sort of lift it all up? Is that part of it?
I think initially we did not intend to spend so much effort on all the things you mentioned, but then this is what happens when you have the art director of Prey, the UI director of Dishonored, the lead animator of Arcane. That's what happens. We, of course, even the audio, Matt Pearsall was the audio director of Prey, so it's gonna have like a lot more of a AAA feel in the wrapper. I think that's what you call the presentation, but
Right.
I think maybe the wrapper is the word here that we would use. It's gonna go there, and even though we started thinking, we're gonna make a small game this time, and it ended up being not that small.
Excellent. The I guess here's a question on the flip side of that. As we sit here with Mayor Weeks, the absolute bastard. I, by the way, loved coming back here. That was fucking one of the most satisfying levels in a game. That was a good laugh. But I guess we talked about some of the prouder stuff you have experience making this. What were some of the things that were tricky? That were like some of the things that maybe went through the most iterations, or an element of the design that caused you guys, a veteran team, by the
Yeah.
sounds of it, the most trouble.
Yeah, we spent way more time on the combat that we wanted. But that's always been the case in any game that we worked on. We always think, oh well, combat is a solved problem, no worry. And then because of its sandboxy nature and because it's at the intersection of every systems and AI and everything, it's always more complex than we thought. And unfortunately, I wish we had more resource there. So combat was very, very painful because of what everything it represents, right? And then taming the procedural. There's been a lot of back and forth about that, like the Friends for Life and some of the stuff, uh, side quests that are some of them are procedural but like very well elegantly integrated, and some of them are just this thing over there. So and there was a moment where there was too much of it, and so that's been a really complex beast to even fully grasp and understand because we had never done it before. And also the breadth of the game. We have a game that is much bigger in scope in a way, in breadth, let's say, than any game that we've made before. Any of the members of the team, and accommodating such a breadth as far as like the player progression and the player difficulty as well, the game difficulty, combat, etc., has
Right.
been it's still in the work for us. It's still something where we are learning from what we've done and how we can do it better for future stuff. Those are really the areas where we really really struggle because the rest, frankly, art direction and all that, those guys are so good. It was just they made the entire art of this game with four people, and
Really?
that includes everybody. That includes the UI, animation, the of course the object and the scenery and everything, icons, everything you can think, and even concept art like the characters' faces, etc. It's people,
Four people.
four people. That should there could be an entire talk at the GDC just about that because
Yeah.
it's remarkable.
You get the right four people, I guess. That's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
good.
you gotta get the right for people. Yeah,
Well, it is funny, just as a last question, uh, it is funny talking about this game as like, not a AAA team and not trying to be AAA and not, it's an indie game and it's from a small amount of people. But when I do compare, and I will compare this with your previous work, when you look at a game like this and you look at a game like Prey is linear. Prey is in one big but singular level where you have a lot of control over the player. Look at this shit. Like,
yeah. It's a little more than we could chew to make it polished, but we've learned so much, and we are polishing it now. I think it's gonna be one of those cool that it looks like that's. I got a few of those already in my in my past where people 10 years later go, "Oh my god, this game was amazing!" It's like, oh well, cool. This time we are supporting it. That's the difference because it's a different type of market now. We don't make all our sales on day one. You make yourself over time. So we're here. We're here. We're just listening to people and feedback, and we are upgrading that game over time. So we want to support that game, and we want to connect with the players. Not in 10 years, but now.
yeah. Was it always the case to have an element of that support? Because obviously, you want your first month sales to be really strong. I know Devolver actually has a sale on at the moment, so I'm sure there's some great stuff happening there. But you did launch and then have the undead. What was it called?
Yeah, the plague, the plague event. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, of course. There's always I think it's part of the industry these days where like there's a part of post release that is important. And but we're enjoying it. We are looking what this interaction between the developers and the gamers mean for the first time. I mean, I've been making games for 20 years or so, and it's the first time that we get to make, we ship a game that is in this new type of era. Like it's not on the stores anymore. It's not on physical stores anymore. I mean, it is, but it's coming later, and it's minimal compared to how people consume games these days. Now there's Game Pass, there's all these new things, new avenues that we've never experienced before. So for us, it's new and it's in different context, and so it will also see what opportunities they bring. And because we have a small team, but we're pretty reactive. Like we can adjust and move that boat pretty quickly compared to a big ship. Then it's exciting. It's an exciting phase for us.